All right, so two things before I get into my actual serious professional introduction. One, Ludovic, who was like, I don't know about dancing during the countdown, just killed it. So way to go, man, in the background. And two, so many other classes just joined in like the last 6 seconds. Welcome in, Hayward, Fabrice, all you guys. So nice to have you all here. My name is Jesse. Welcome to another exciting broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. We've got some of our all-time fave classes. They've been in like 50 programs this year. We've got some new faces in the crowd. So if you are new to us, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. We do 50 broadcasts every single month, all of which live on our YouTube channel. So you can check out 3,000 plus past programs with any science or exploration topic you can think of. They are all right there. Today is our second day of an epic Oceans Week celebration. We have been featuring scientists and explorers around the world. It is our biggest week of the year. 21 broadcasts. It's been so much fun. If you didn't get the chance to check it out, head to that YouTube channel and find out more. And specifically at 1 Eastern every day, we are doing this epic series Monday through Thursday with the amazing folks at the National Research Council of Canada. Say that 5 times fast. nrc.canada.ca if you want to learn more about their stuff, and the entire series is at our website below. Just yesterday, we had a really incredible kickoff to the program. We've got 2 more to come the next 2 days at 1 o'clock. But today, we are joined by Bailey and Ludovic, who are going to take us through the big deal with small plastics. For years now, in September, we spend much of the month talking about marine plastics, and particularly small plastic pollution. This is a topic of huge interest to classes and the general public. It's one that I love to talk about because it's totally apolitical. No one looks at a beach full of plastic or oceans full of fish full of plastic and goes, great. We all recognize this is a problem. We all want to find solutions, and research like that done by Bailey and Ludovic is helping us find those solutions and understand more about the scale of this issue. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome them in to blow your mind. I'm so excited for all your questions. We've got tons of classes in today. Without further ado, Bailey, Ludovic, welcome to the broadcast, you two. Nice to have you for the first time. This is great.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Well, I know you have a lot to share with us today, so if you want to bring it up and dive right in, literally and figuratively, that's my 10th time I've done that joke in 2 days, then feel free to bring that up, and we'll get underway.
Will do.
You too. Awesome. All right.
Go.
You're good to go. It looks beautiful.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect. So hello, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about what is the big deal about small plastic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bailey, and I'm a technical officer working at the National Research Council. And currently, I'm working on a project that's looking at the effects of microplastic on zebrafish.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ludovic, and I'm a research associate working at the National Research Council. And I'm working also with Bailey on a project about microplastic effects on zebrafish, but I'm also interested about microplastic fate and effects in organism overall, but specifically on zebrafish.
So first off, what is a microplastic? So we can actually break this word down into 2 different parts to tell us what it means. So the first part of this word is micro, which means small. And these particles are actually less than 5 millimeters in length. And the second half of this word is plastic, which tells us that these super small particles are made of plastic. And there's tons of different kinds of plastic that these particles can be made up of. And here we can see a size comparison down in the bottom right-hand corner of the size of these microplastics that we're looking at compared to a penny. So they're super small and very hard to see with your eyes. But we can actually see them in some of the things that we use every day. Things like microbeads in toothpaste down in the middle. And then we also have microplastic pellets down at the end there. And these are actually melted down to make those bigger plastic things that we use on a daily basis.
So now we're going to just play for you a short video about how plastic is made.
Plastics are made of polymers, which are molecules that have many repeated parts over and over. For example, ethylene has 2 carbon and 4 hydrogen atoms, whereas polyethylene is many of them strung together and makes the most popular plastic in the world, like your grocery bag. Right now, 99% of all plastic is made from fossil fuels. These fuels are taken out of the ground, refined into crude oil, and then broken down into simple monomers. These monomers then go through a process called polymerization to stick them all together, and it's at this stage that different chemicals are added to change the characteristics of the plastic, whether it will be flexible or stiff, colorful or clear. And finally, this polymerized liquid is cooled and chopped into millions of tiny pieces called nurdles, which are shipped all over the world and ultimately heated and molded into whatever shape a manufacturer desires.
So now we're going to talk about where the microplastics are coming from. So you can distinguish two sources of microplastic in the environment. First, primary microplastics. So those are made of small pieces of plastic, specifically at that size. So we have a different kind of source of those, three main sources. So the first here is the household product, which like you can find microplastic within, as Bailey said previously, toothpaste or other like cleaning products. You also have the pre-production pellets, or also called in the video nurdles. Those are used by plastic manufacturers to be used to make larger pieces of plastic by those. And finally, the third source is microfiber. After kind of washing your clothes in your synthetic clothes in the washing machine. So those microfiber just kind of go down the drain and are not retained by like wastewater treatment plants, and then they can go into the environment through rivers, for example. So you distinguish those primary sources against secondary sources, which are the results of the breaking down of larger plastic pieces in the environment. So those can be, for example, like if we take an example of a plastic bottle that can be like, found unfortunately in the sea, like under the action of the sun, abrasion, if it's like by a beach, for example, the sand's gonna kind of mess that up. And the waves, that's going to produce tiny pieces of microplastic from the larger pieces. So those are the two main sources of microplastics, so primary and secondary. So if you look at the whole environment, you can see two types of sources also, like are they coming from the sea or are they coming from the land? So from the sea, you can find fishing gear, for example, people littering plastic, so marine litter. Also, a big ship, when pellets or the pre-production pellets are transported from one country to another, they can be unfortunately lost. And also, some of the marine paint that are on boats are kind of made of plastic. So those are like the sea-based sources. But we can, like, unfortunately, plastic are also produced from land-based sources. So one example is like litter can also go through rivers, etc. Personal care product, for example, as a toothpaste, but also wearing and washing of clothing can go through the drain and are not retained by the wastewater treatment plant, and then those are just going to rivers or the ocean directly. Driving a car produce also plastic because those tires are made of plastic, and the abrasion with the road produce plastic. The road marking themselves are made of plastic, and they can be kind of abrasion can occur and like they can degrade. Some sewage sludge from wastewater treatment plant can also be used as fertilizer in the field, and those can be a source of microplastic. Some of the synthetic turf are made of plastic and just like release plastic in the environment. Pellet can be also lost at the manufacturing sites and go down through the rivers. And you can also just find plastic within the dust in the city, but also in your home. For example, a drying machine is going to produce lint, and that lint, if you are drying some synthetic clothes, is going to produce microfiber that can go out by the exhaust. Sorry.
That's okay. There should always be one slide in every program that refuses to go to the next one. So you have that problem, now we're done.
Good to know we're on track. So now that we know where the microplastics are coming from, are they bad for the environment? So they can be because they accumulate in the environment and they can cause harm to all different kinds of animals. And most of this harm is actually due to the larger plastic pieces. So things like this can happen where we see a bird's nest that's mostly made out of plastic, which causes a choking hazard for this young bird living in there. Or we can also see animals like whales, while they're swimming in the ocean, they can accidentally eat these plastics and actually ingest them. When they eat these plastics, they can accumulate in their stomachs and it can actually block their intestines, which cannot allow them to eat any more food, which can be really, really harmful down the line for them. And we know that plastics are actually ingested by more than 1,500 different types of animals. So now that we know kind of what the big pieces do to animals, it's really important that we understand how harmful these small plastic pieces can have on animals as well.
So this is why we're here. So what do we do at the National Research Council? So here we perform a laboratory experiment using zebrafish, and the objective of doing that is to understand the effects of microplastic on organisms, specifically zebrafish. So what do we do really? We just like put a different type of plastic, so polyethylene, polystyrene, etc. In the fish tank. They have different size, different concentration, and all of that we kind of try to understand what are the impact of those plastic on the fish, so their behavior, their health, also their reproduction, and we also try to see if those fish ingest those different type of plastic, and if they ingest those plastic, we try to see where it's going into the fish. So what is a zebrafish? So as you can see on the picture here, a zebrafish is named that way because it has kind of blue lines across its body that resemble a zebra. So a zebrafish is a freshwater fish that is coming from southern Asia and can grow up to be, as an adult, 4 to 5 centimeters in its maximum length. So here is just a small picture of a zebrafish larvae in one of the whales we have in the lab. So those are like very tiny and you need kind of a scope to see them. And here is a picture of the zebrafish within the National Research Council facility in their tank just before we feed them.
So now we're going to look a little bit into the zebrafish life cycle. So these guys start out as a fertilized egg, which then grows into an embryo. And then these embryos hatch and turn into larvae. And then after a metamorphosis, they grow up into the adults that we showed you on the last slide. And for the experiments that we're doing right now, we've done a lot of work looking at the embryo and the larva stage. And this is because we want to see how plastic in the water affects these fish growing up. And then later on, we're going to hopefully look into how the plastic affects the adults as well. But we're going to show you a couple pictures from this project that we've been talking about. So right now, you're looking at a close-up of the gut of a zebrafish, a larva zebrafish. And in red there, that's actually all plastic. So with plastic in the water with this fish, we actually see it eating all of this plastic, and it accumulates inside this intestine. And we can actually see down at the bottom there, we can see that this fish is actually pooping out the plastic as well. Another place that we see this plastic accumulating in the fish is inside its brain. So that arrow on the left there is showing those red plastic particles accumulating inside of the brain of the fish. And then the second arrow on the right is showing the plastic inside a really important blood vessel. So the plastic is in an aorta that runs the entire length of the fish. The last picture I'll show you is this one, where we see the red plastic accumulating this time on the gills of the fish. So as the fish is swimming through the water, we see the plastic particles are actually sticking to the outside of the gills.
So just to wrap up everything that we talked about today and that we learned. So today we learned about what microplastics are and where they are coming from. So microplastics are small pieces of plastic smaller than 5 millimeters in length, and they are coming from everywhere in the environment and can be classified as like either primary if they are like small made to be small, or secondary if they are just degrading from larger species in the environment. We also learn about what a zebrafish is and a bit about its life cycle and how we use that into the lab. We also learn about what the debris can do to organisms in the wild, mostly either entanglement with the plastic or if the organism ingest those plastic and what are those consequences. And we also learn about what do we do, Bailey and I, as scientists at the National Research Council, to understand the effects of those microplastics, specifically on zebrafish, but also globally on fish. So we were very excited to talk about that today, and we hope that you learn a lot. And we would like to thank you all for your attention today. Thank you very much.
Thank you two very much. That was wonderful. If you want to come out of screen share, well, you already did. And with questions, YouTubers, feel free to share questions there. We got a whole bunch of live classes with us, which is spectacular. Ms. Appello's class, you'll have to share in the chat, but I look forward to all your queries there. I'm going to begin with one that we get every time we have a microplastics presentation, and that is, if I'm eating fish, if I go to the store or the restaurant today and eat some fish from a lake or from an ocean, am I eating microplastics? Who's taking charge of that? Is that happening? Are anyone assessing them for microplastics? Or what's the situation on fish that I'm eating?
So I can answer for that. I've worked previously on that, and the answer is we kind of don't know yet, just because microplastic, depending on their side, they kind of mostly go through the digestive tract and the intestine of the fish. As we've shown, they also go other places, but as human, we mostly eat fish. We only eat the fish fillet. Mostly, it's pretty rare in most culture that the whole fish is not eaten often. So the percentage of plastic that goes into the fillet of the fish is very, very small and kind of up to debate in the scientific community right now. So we are kind of unsure. However, if you're buying mussels or oysters or kind of those filtering shellfish, definitely you're eating plastic with those. But the fish, it's a bit more complicated.
It's been a big topic all Oceans Week long, whether you're looking at deep sea basins, whether you're looking at things that we're going to islands for the first time in the middle of the ocean. Plastic really is everywhere. I mean, there's not a place. You can go to the top of Mount Everest and find plastic. You can go to freshly fallen snow in Antarctica and find plastic. We've produced this material that is fantastic in so many ways, but has a lot of deleterious impacts on wildlife and the environment that we're just starting to get a bigger understanding of and trying to find ways to mitigate. So I love that as a first question. You two, you don't need to worry about the chat. I'll make sure I take all the questions from there so that people can hear them all, and I'll share them out loud. And I love this question from Johannes and Ms. Appello's class. Is plastic a chemical? And I understand a bit of the backdrop of this question. So you answer first, and I'll chime in if there's anything that I think they're looking for with this.
Yeah, so is plastic a chemical? So in the small video, you could see that plastic is kind of coming from fossil fuel, and it's at the beginning kind of small molecules that all combine together to do the big polymer. So that's kind of not it's a long chain of molecules, and it's not a chemical per se, but in plastic, as the video said, they add some chemicals that are called plastic additive that kind of give certain properties to the plastic, such as their colors or the fact that very rigid or soft, etc. So they are not a chemical per se. They're starting from very small molecules to bigger ones.
So a bit of the context on this, just because we get this question a lot from students when things that are engineered come into play. There's a lot of health claims made around things that are chemicals or not. And sort of by and large, what people are doing there is massaging the truth. Pretty much, I mean, everything is rooted in chemistry. So whether it's a water molecule, whether it's plastic, whether it's glass, whether it's your hair, there are chemicals, molecules that are in that does not necessarily denote a good or a bad thing, which is something really worth looking for if you're looking online for news about impacts on the environment, about things for your health. So just keep that in mind. But I do like that answer with regards to plastic. So thank you for that. We're going to go to our Help Environmental Leaders Mystery and Pleasures class. Just got back from another amazing project because they're the coolest class ever. So grade 10, if you guys want to come on in, unmute your mic, I'll bring you in and you're good to go. Hey guys.
We have three.
Hi, I'm just wondering why you chose zebrafish as to do your study on.
Yes, I'm so glad this question got asked.
Great question. I'll take that one. Zebrafish are actually used in a bunch of different labs because they're kind of what's accepted as a model organism. And so the reason that we're using them is because they have a lot in common with humans that you can use for a bunch of different experiments. For us too, they're really easy to grow and they're really small and they're really cost effective. So we can do a lot of different experiments with zebrafish that you couldn't do with like bigger fish like salmon or something like that. So that's kind of our main consideration for these guys, as well as there's been a lot of science already done on the fish. So we don't have to start from scratch to know kind of what's going on with them. There's already been a lot of research. So we kind of know where they're at and we can use all of that to figure out kind of what the plastic does to them, which is what we're interested in.
For our students, if you are a nerdy biologist like all of us here, there are like 4 things that you will see: fruit flies, house mouse, zebrafish, and Arabidopsis. So there's a plant, an invertebrate, a fish, and a mammal, and they are in every lab in the world. You can't go to a single university without running into like 80,000 of all of those things. So I'm really glad we got the zebrafish question. Thanks for that, guys. 6 7s, we're going to head to our Bishop crew. If you guys want to unmute your mic, you're in the broadcast. Welcome in. Hi. If you have any questions for us, just come unmute and you're good to go. And then Hayward 5 6s, I'm coming to you guys next. I love the YouTube questions in our classes that don't have their devices. I'll make sure to come to all of you in a sec as well. But 6 7s, any questions? Maybe kind of sort of.
No questions.
No questions. That's okay. Thanks for checking in. If you do have any, you can let me know in the chat and I'll come to you guys ASAP. Hayward 5 6s, unmute your mic and come on in. Hey guys. Hi. Yes, but unmute. More fun to hear you. There we are. Hi. No, you muted it again. Just press the mute button the one time. There you go. You're good.
No questions either.
No questions either. Oh, well, you just answered everything. Bailey Ludovic, you killed it. This Lavas class, Peel Virtual Elementary School. Peel Virtual Elementary School has been in programs all day long. Way to go, guys. If a fish has microplastic in them, when they lay eggs in the water without microplastic, will the microplastic pass on to their babies? Do we see plastic in like germline cells? Interesting question.
So there's actually only been, I think, one study that I read on this, and there is actually a potential for the plastics to transfer on to the next generation. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected that, and I've never heard of that, so that's very cool. There you go.
Yeah.
There you go, kids. Breaking news. Never featured in any Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast before. Great question to the chat. Miss Appello, you guys are killing it. Let's see. Do animals die right away after ingesting plastic?
No, it takes time. It also depends on what size of plastic they're eating. If they're eating a ton of the bigger plastic, then they'll probably die sooner because it blocks their stomach. But we don't actually know how long it takes with the microplastic side. That's what we're looking into.
Yeah. A great follow-up for this. I just noticed from our St. Isidore virtual school, so Ms. Randall's class, welcome into you guys. Jerusha wanted to know, how long do fish normally live and how does the plastic contamination affect their lifespan?
Great question. So the zebrafish that we're looking at usually live for about 2 years. And we haven't done any studies yet looking at the whole life cycle of the fish yet. We've only done the first little bit to see how they're growing. But we will be doing a project to see long-term how it affects the fish. So if they kind of die halfway through or if they grow up just fine, we'll be seeing that hopefully in the next couple of years. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. 6 7s, you guys are right up at the camera and then you ran away. Come back. If your mics do work, I'd love to have you in on camera. That's half the fun of these broadcasts. So if you want to share that question, I'll bring you up. There we go. Unmute. Come ask that. I know you typed it, but it's better to share. Hi.
Hi. How does the plastic even get into their brain? Like, is it just with them from birth, or is it like kind of passed on when they eat?
Yeah.
Great question. So the plastic that we were looking at in that is really, really, really small. It's like 40 nanometers. So super, super, super tiny. You need a microscope to be able to see it. And how it gets into the brain is so it's eaten, it's taken up, and it's accumulating within the intestine. But then it's so small that it can actually pass through different organs and get passed around the body into the bloodstream. So the gut is super highly vascularized, so a lot of blood vessels around it to be able to kind of take out nutrients from food. But these plastics are so small that they're getting taken up with all of the food nutrients as well and getting passed around inside the bloodstream. And then the blood goes inside the brain, and then it ends up everywhere.
Yeah, great questions, guys. Now the floodgates have opened for everybody. Help environmental leaders. You've been asking a bunch, but I'd love to ask you in person, especially your last one is very cool. So if you want to unmute your mic, you can come on back in and you're good to go, Ms. Tremblay. Hey.
Okay, so I'm here. Lots of our kids want to know. We have ponds here. Can you see microplastics using just a regular classroom microscope if we were to take a sample of our water?
Yeah, you can. Like microplastic are like smaller than 5 millimeters. So like everything that like is like between 1 to 5. For example, pellets. Like it's very something that like you can see in the environment. Like I used to live in Toronto before, and like on one of the river in Toronto, you have like a lot of plastic industry. And, like you can just see like the pellets and like other large kind of plastic items on the beach. That are kind of classified as microplastic. Once you get into the smaller stuff, like maybe less than 0.5 millimeter, yes, you need a microscope. But like, if you have a microscope in a science class, I'm pretty sure you could see them.
Yep. When I was in university, we did stuff with microscopes, and actually the plastics were bigger than some of the creatures we were looking at. But I will note, for any class that has never taken a microscope and looked at like a drop of pond water, that will blow your mind, okay? Like you have no idea how many billions and trillions of things live in like every drop of water you have ever found ever, and it's mind-blowing to have that perspective on the world. So I really like that question. I'm going to share actually one from you guys again, just because I think it's really important for classes to know. One of our classes in the chat mentioned bioaccumulation. Could you explain what that even is for our classes that might never have come upon that term before?
Sure. Yeah, great question. Bioaccumulation is a big word. It basically just means that something, in this case plastic, is accumulating within an organism itself. So that's where the bio comes from, is the organism, and then the accumulation is stuff is getting into the fish and it's not being passed through. There's some of it that's sticking around in there.
Yep. Fantastic, guys. Miss Dillon's class, Farmington, Missouri. This is their third broadcast they've joined us for today. So they just skipped all the lessons. Who needs lessons when you can hang out with the coolest scientists and explorers in the world? So great to have you here again. How small do microplastics get? Again, we're getting to very small things here, but like, do they keep breaking down and get smaller and smaller and smaller? Do you know if there's a limit? Anything you can share on that?
Yeah, so they do kind of break down to like small and small. Like they can be as big as like 1 micron. So like it's like you need to have a pretty powerful like microscope to see those. And like it also has been kind of demonstrated in the literature that like they also break down to what is called nanoplastic, which is smaller than 1 micron. And those like a microscope, you need like very, very expensive microscope, and they are like very hard to like, even for us, like kind of find in the environment. So like, but those also like we know that they exist in nature.
So for our high school class, you guys have the microscopes about yay big. We've seen those before. I think a lot of our students might be familiar with that. When you go to universities, you get these electron microscopes. And I walked in the room once and I saw one. I said, how much does that cost? And the professor said, it's about $500,000. I was like, don't even let me near that thing. I don't even want to be in the same room as that thing. Close the door. Just like, keep it away from me. It's really high-tech toys to look at some of these really cool things at the very nano scale. So great question, Ms. Dillon's class. By the way, I will note, I didn't even mention this in my intro. It is Oceans Week, not just generally, but in Canada as well. This is the Oceans Week Canada shirt. And if people want to check out specifically our Canadian series of events, they were the people who brought together the NRC for this incredible series, oceanweekcan.ca, to learn more about that as well. Hayward 5 and 6s. You guys have been at the camera for ages. I'm sorry I've had to take so long. But come on back in and unmute your mic, and you're good to go. Hey.
No, guys. So my question is, if they have the microplastics in them from birth, does it grant them like an immunity or resistance to it?
Ooh, I like the way that you're thinking.
Great question. I don't think so. I think if they're born with the microplastics, In them, there's not a lot that's been shown, at least with the studies in between generations. There's only been that one study that I talked about, and we haven't seen kind of how that looks if they're born with it. Are they better or worse at surviving in the environment compared to like their parents, for example? But my initial guess, scientific guess, would be that no, I don't think it really grants them anything special in the environment. They're just kind of unfortunately starting out at a disadvantage with already having plastic in them compared maybe to some other fish.
So I think, and you might actually know this, to my knowledge, we're starting to maybe find bacteria that might be able to get something, certain kinds of bacteria that might be able to get something out of plastic, which is super, super cool. But for humans, for 99% of everything that's ever existed on the earth, plastic is not something that they can extract as a resource. Like, it's not something that will benefit them. It'll either be neutral or more likely than not negative, is what we're finding generally in research. So it's not something that we want our animals to have. I will note too, just as a follow-up to this, because it's one of my favorite programs that I completely forgot about it until we got that question. If you go to our YouTube channel and look up Anna Ruth Roebuck, she has done she's done seabird dissections live on camera where they're highlighting the plastic that birds have eaten in a broadcast. It's a little gross, but it's really spectacular to see. Every time she gets seabirds, they find plastic in them, which is wild. So this is something that is a big issue that, again, a lot of our classes do recognize. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to take two from YouTube, and then I'm going to go back to our live classes. St. Isidore Virtual School 6, 7, environmental leaders. Get ready with questions if you have them. Let's see. Miss Dillon's class wants to know, how did you get your job? People want to be you. What do they do? Tell us more.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I can go first. So how did I get my job? So I studied like marine biology as a master's student, and then went on to a PhD, and I worked on microplastic contamination in seafood as a PhD student. That was back home in France, and then I moved here in Canada, where I got like a junior researcher like kind of grant at the University of Toronto, and worked there for like a few years. And then the position I'm in now just open. I just applied and like kind of got it, but like I did biology studies for my BSc and my master, and then went for a PhD.
Very cool.
Yeah. And then on my side of things, kind of similar. I also studied marine biology in university, but I was really lucky, and I was in this program in university called Co-op, where we got to do 4-month work terms at different locations. And I lucked out, and I got to do one of my terms at the NRC, and I got to work on this plastics project. And then once I graduated, I was lucky enough that they wanted me back. And so now here I am working on this project still, and still loving it.
I'm so happy you mentioned this. So one of the things we like to feature with classes all the time is the idea that a lot of amazing researchers, scientists, explorers start out by doing the thing that they end up doing. Not to say that a basic university education isn't an extraordinary tool and into things, but if you get the chance to work with people doing the stuff that you want to be doing, you make connections, you get to go to those places, it's such an enriching experience, and actually gives you that tangible understanding of what that job is going to be. So co-op people make up a lot of the people we feature on these programs. So I really encourage that for you students. I want to note too, I don't know why my chat wasn't having things come through. You guys have like some of the most detailed science questions I've ever seen in like 7 years of broadcasting. So I'm going to take a few of them because they're great. St. Isidore, Ms. Randall's class. Jerusha has all the questions today. What are the advantages of zebrafish over mice and rats as a research organism? Why them?
Great question. Great question. So a couple different things. First off, they're a lot less expensive than mice are. And when you're doing these super long-term studies where you want to look at a bunch of different things, cost does come into play a little bit. So they're a lot cheaper to take care of than mice. They're also smaller. So they're a lot smaller, so you can have more fish in a smaller area. So again, you have more power to do more research because you have more fish in one space than you could a mouse. So really, really helpful, especially if you're in like a smaller research facility. You can do more with fish in a small space than you can with mice. And then the third part of that is actually their life cycle. So they have a much quicker, shorter life cycle than mouse does. So if you're looking at stuff like we do, where we want to look at how plastic affects how they're developing from an embryo into a larva. They actually are in their embryo stage for a couple days, about 3 days, and then they hatch, and then they're a larva until about 5 days. So I can have a big chunk of their life cycle looking at for only 5 days, which in a mouse, it takes a lot longer for it to grow up than a fish does. And that's really, really helpful, again, to be able to do stuff really quick.
This is a lot of the genetics research in the world has been done on the fruit flies I mentioned, and bacteria particularly, because they can have, in the bacteria case, they can have 30 generations in a couple days, if not one day. Whereas for us, I mean, people 30 generations back for humanity is like thousands and thousands of years ago, right? And so it's a really useful tool when you're studying things. Jerusha, if you want to do a co-op, I'm sure Bailey and Ludovic will have you join them.
Come on down.
Ms. Appello's got there's so many great questions. Geez. Ms. Appello's class, can fish throw out plastic after ingesting it? This is from Evelyn. Can they get rid of it anyway or not?
Yeah, so we actually saw that one of those photos that the fish are actually capable of pooping out the plastic. So they can't throw it up, but they can poop it out. So if it's kind of the right size, then the fish can kind of tell that it's not something that it wants in there, and then it can kind of flush it away with all the other stuff it doesn't want when it's pooping that stuff out. So yeah, it can get rid of it.
Amazing. And then our environmental leader crew. This is such a great question. I'm just going to share it because it's online. Is there a good reference that'll tell you the difference between a plastic fiber in comparison to something like hair? They have this big bowl of material that they got from their local pond, and they want to figure out if there's a way to tell the difference between organic and synthetic fibers. Great question.
Good question. I think you have a few resources in the scientific literature where but again, that requires kind of more expensive equipment where you need like a high magnification scope, etc., because you kind of look at the thread, and like the thread of the fibers are a bit different if they are synthetic versus like natural, like cotton and stuff like that. Also, when we, at least in the lab, when we sample kind of organism, we kind of look at the plastic in them, etc., and we find fibers. We kind of have to confirm that those fibers are either plastic or natural, and for those we have like specific tools that's going to kind of give you a fingerprint of those fibers to tell what they are. So the shortest answer is yes, but it's like kind of a more like lab stuff to do kind of thing.
Yeah, fantastic question, guys. All right, I'm going to take two final ones because time flies and you're having fun, and we could go all day, it seems. I'm going to head to St. Isidore Virtual School, had another one, and then I'm going to go to YouTube to wrap up in a second. They want to know, can investigations into microplastics help in animal research subjects assist in human cancer studies? Is there any link between these two at all, or nothing that you know offhand? I'm curious.
Nothing that I know offhand in terms of plastic helping with human cancer, but zebrafish as model organisms have been used in a ton of experiments, even stuff that we're doing here at the NRC, to look at different cancer models and how we can look into kind of curing cancer and figuring out all of that good stuff using these zebrafish as models that can then translate into different human studies, but nothing that I know of with plastic and cancer.
The one good note I'll say for our classes is pretty much every time scientists do research of any kind, there's some link that someone's going to try and find a cancer. I mean, this is one of the essential maladies on the planet. And the good news is that we regularly do find these things. We've been talking over the last couple of days about some of the marine organisms where there's compounds and things that they create that can actually show promise in early cancer studies. We've found quite a few. But by the way, this cancer seems to be linked as like a big monolithic thing. There are hundreds and hundreds of different diseases that are linked under cancer, and many of them are either easily curable or way better standards of healthcare than they ever used to be because of the things we've discovered from the natural world. So I'm really glad we get these questions. You two, I'm going to finalize with one great question because it's the best question. Callan wants to know, how dangerous is microplastic and how can we help? What can we do to make a difference?
So I feel like it's more of what you can do as a difference, like for example, in your like everyday life, instead of like buying stuff like wrapped in a lot of plastic, you can just go like for less single-use plastic. Also, a good thing to like do is like around politics, and like if you are in Canada, like writing to your MPP, for example, to like push towards like laws about like banning single-use plastic. They are doing it in Canada, but like there's a lot of things efforts that the government can do also to like reduce plastic consumption as like at the whole thing as a country. But you can do stuff at your own scale at home and like with your class, etc.
Fantastic. One of the things that we've always liked sharing in these broadcasts is just don't waste. Such a simple idea. Don't waste emissions, don't waste plastic, don't waste food. Whatever it is, whatever topic that we feature in these broadcasts, that is a universal truth that applies to anything that you're doing that will help the environment, help people, help wildlife. So I love when we get the questions of how classes can help. And so thank you very much for that. For you two, before we wrap up and bring in our classes, to say a big thank you and farewell, and classes, you can unmute your mics in preparation for that. Is there any final message you want to leave our classes with as we continue on our Oceans Week extravaganza?
I don't know, like just as I said, like and as you said, Jesse, like plastic and like just don't waste, and I try to like find ways to like reduce what you can, but also talk to your like MPP or like local governments and stuff that they can raise the issue with like the higher ups, and like that way we can kind of reduce the plastic we are using on a like daily basis kind of thing.
Fantastic. Bailey, do you have anything to add? Sorry.
Oh, no, it's all good. He pretty much covered everything.
Perfect. Well, I'm so glad you mentioned write your MP too. Kids these days increasingly know that you can get involved with politics, and if 500,000 of you march for something, you will enact some pretty good legislative change pretty quickly. So look to see which parties are voting for things that you support, and when you have the opportunity to vote, make those changes and talk to your families and friends and teachers about that, because it really does go a long way to making a big difference. Thank you two so much for a fantastic first program with us ever. You can come back anytime. As I've noted, this is part of our epic NRC Oceans Week. If you want to check that out on the website below, it's fantastic. nrc.canada.ca for more about the amazing research that we are doing coast to coast to coast with people like Bailey and Ludovic. And join us tomorrow and the next day for more programs at 1 p.m. Eastern. What we do to wrap up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in our teachers to say thank you and farewell. Help environmental leaders, 6 7s. Hey, we are, 5 6s. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye for now, guys. Thanks, everyone.